obviously we've got to begin with the big story, which is the Brady hand injury. And Matthew, this is definitely starting to impact the number already.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, this is unbelievable, and it just goes to show you the power of information in 2018 and how it impacts a betting line. Look, we were all New England money 24 hours ago. A couple of sharp bets on Jacksonville, but a couple of big sharp bets on New England, too, and all of a sudden, Brady hits his hand against the helmet of another player in practice. It's not broken. The x-rays come back and show zero structural damage, and what do we see? A flood of action on the Jacksonville Jaguars come in. We're down to 7.5, and I can tell you this line's headed to 7.
Wow, that's incredible. I saw a little picture, a little photo on one of the SportsCenter shows today, right as I came into the studio, where they were showing this big, thick glove on his hand. Don't know if he's going to use it or not. He used them early in his career, and he said he'd rather play without the glove than with it. So it'll be interesting.
Between now and Sunday, you would think that swelling would subside.
Sure,
nothing's broken. I got a feeling he's going to be fine, Matt.
Yeah, I do too. To your point, not only is nothing broken, there was no ligament strains or anything here. I mean, this is no structural damage found. He wailed it against someone's helmet. To your point, it's probably going to be swelling and bruised for a couple of days, but I have a feeling Tom Brady's going to be fine too, and that there could be some people that wish. I think there could be some middle spots in this game. Look, there were some spots right out of the gate where you could have got 10 or at least 9.5 bought to 10 and now be down at 7. This thing could end up presenting a middle opportunity.
What about go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was going to ask you, were there any corresponding moves on the total?
No, that's the funny part of this game. We opened at 46, and it seemed like the sharp money here would be on the under. It's New England in January, although the weather's not supposed to be terrible. They're so good at taking away the number one option away from other teams that you have to assume they're going to do a good job against Fournette, who's kind of banged up anyway. And with Jacksonville's defense, that total seemed a smidge high anyway. But after back-to-back, overs last weekend, we thought we'd open it a little high. Thought I'd get a little more under action than we have, but they're betting the over.
Vikings have been as high as 3.5. Last check, 3 at Philly, total 38.5. Interesting game, Matt. Minnesota should have lost last week. You got Nick Foles, though. He goes 23 of 30 for the Eagles. What are your thoughts? Not only, we'll hear the handle from you in just a second, but your thoughts on the value of Case Keenum against Nick Foles?
Yeah, that's an interesting conundrum here. I think a week ago everybody thought Nick Foles was, they were talking about a 10-point difference. They were talking about the difference between Wentz to Foles being equal to the difference between Aaron Rodgers to his backups there, whether it was Matt Flynn a couple years ago or this year to Hundley. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, Wentz had a good year, but as a second-year player, we're comparing him to Aaron Rodgers and his impact to the betting line, and it just seemed like people got a little ahead of themselves, and then Foles actually had a good game against the Giants, that one start, came back, had a fairly efficient game last week, and now all of a sudden everyone's okay. What we're seeing now, though, is two-way betting action on this game, where the public is all over the Minnesota Vikings, and the sharps are all over the Philadelphia Eagles here. Interestingly enough, though, we did take one $20K bet from a sharp. I had the opportunity to talk to him about the game. I said, why did you bet the Vikings? All the sharps seem to be on the Eagles. He goes, it's simple for me. This is the same spread it was last week with the Falcons, and Minnesota's a lot better than Atlanta.
That's a good point.
That is a very good point. And one other thing to throw in, and it's not an opinion that I have as much as just a thought. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to play the game. Philadelphia was still -2 in the turnover category last week, right?
Yeah, they were. You're correct. They were -2 in the turnovers last week.
If they lose the turnover battle in this game, they're not going to win the football game. I can tell you that. Atlanta was Atlanta all year long. They failed to take advantage of situations really from the start of the season till the end. They had a one game where maybe it was a glimmer that they had put it behind them with the win the prior week. They just weren't that good, and I'll tell you what that bettor said made a whole lot of sense. For the Vikings and Atlanta to be the same price, that does indicate some value on the road team.
And not the same price a month apart, back-to-back weeks. That could be a really valid point.
All right.
Good stuff. Let's go to UFC 220. What do you say? And I was going to say, let's start right at the top when you've got the big main event, epic battle on paper, Matt. Francis Ngannou has come down a bit since we spoke last week. He was around -$2 a week ago. He's now around $1.80, $1.85 at CG Sportsbooks. Where will your money be, Matt, and why?
Look, we just went back up to 190 just as we spoke, as we just took another small 5-figure bet on Francis Ngannou, and we have a fairly significant liability to him at this point. The betting activity's been interesting here because people know the name Miocic a little bit because he's the reigning defending UFC heavyweight champion, and he's defended the belt twice, both of those title defense equaling first-round knockout victories for the champ. So there is a little love for Miocic. While Ngannou is this unbelievable puncher, I don't know that he has all the mainstream media attention captured yet. The public is all over him in this spot because he fought recently. I mean, he just fought a couple of months ago, had that unbelievable uppercut knockout of Alistair Overeem, which kind of caught the attention of everyone, as well as the fact that they measured his power punching, and as far as anyone they've ever measured, he's technically the hardest puncher in the world of anyone ever to be measured. But I like Stipe Miocic here. I bet Stipe Miocic already. Look, he has all the other intangibles in this fight. Amazing footwork. He knocked out Fabricio Verdum to win the heavyweight title moving backwards. I mean, his footwork's astounding. His counterpunching's amazing. He has a wrestling background pedigree that he can fall onto if this thing ends up going to the ground. I think there's a lot of weapons for Stipe Miocic. Punching power is great, and I don't expect either of these. I don't expect this fight to get out of the first round, but Stipe Miocic is also on a 4 consecutive first-round knockout win streak, just like Francis Ngannou is here. And I think at this price currently, there's a lot of value on the champ and the underdog. Got
to ask you about one other underdog that seems to be getting a little bit of money, and that's Dustin Ortiz right now around plus $1.20 against the cannibal Alessandro Pantoja. Just wondered if you feel Ortiz's strength is going to prove a little too much for him in what I think is going to be a relatively close fight. This was the one that jumped off the page at me, Matt. Ortiz to get the win as a short underdog.
Yeah, and I bet Dustin Ortiz, too. I bet 4 underdogs on this card. Stipe Miocic, Hamasi, Boston Rob Font, and Dustin Ortiz. And I just look at who Dustin Ortiz has fought. Brandon Bam Bam Moreno ranked. Jussier Da Silva ranked. Wilson Heiss fought for the title. Joseph Benavidez fought for the title twice. He owns a win over Ray Borg, who just fought for the title against Demetrius Johnson in his last fight. I mean, Dustin Ortiz, basically, at only 29 years old, feels like he's been around forever here, has fought everyone there is to fight in the flyweight division in the UFC. He has all that experience, and he's actually kind of hot right now, winning 2 of his last 3 fights, climbing back up the rankings. On the other side of it, Pantoja is completely unproven here. He has 2 fights in the UFC. He's 2-0, but one of them's a split decision win over Neil Shelton. Neil Seary, the guy he beat in his last fight, retired after that fight. It was the Neil Seary retirement fight, an old Irish fighter, Neil Seary. And Pantoja, the one common opponent they have, Jussier Da Silva, also beat Pantoja easily. And look, most of his fights come in Shuto. I think the fact that his record's 18-2 and looks so impressive is probably bringing a little bit of the love here for Pantoja, but I'm with you, and I'm riding on Dustin Ortiz.
Any other fights grabbing your betting attention? I know you got a few.
Yeah, Boston Rob Font here. That's my favorite fight of this card. Look, these 2 guys are absolutely going to slug it out. Thomas Almeida is the name here, but these 2 are really close in skill level. A couple of years ago, Almeida was the hottest young prospect in the UFC because he's kind of the Arturo Gatti of UFC. He would be almost knocked out in all these fights and then come back and win them. But when you look at the opponents that Almeida fought that hurt him and almost beat him, he had to come back against Albert Morales. 1-2 since the Almeida fight. Anthony Burchak, 1-3 since the Almeida fight. Brad Pickett, 1-3 since the Almeida fight and retired. Yves Jobin, 0-1 since the Almeida fight and retired. Basically, Almeida hasn't beaten anyone of substance. On the other side of it, Rob Font only losses to John Lineker and Pedro Munez, also both ranked guys. And look, the one thing I've noticed in MMA the past couple of years from someone who bets every single card, every single week, is that the judging in MMA is starting to replicate the judging in boxing, where these fans, these crowds, seem to be having an impact on the judging. We're seeing more bad decisions, and we're seeing more hometown decisions than we ever have seen in MMA. And look, I like the fact that in a fight where there's going to be a lot of volume and a lot of punches thrown, every time Boston Rob lands here, the crowd's going to be going crazy. I'm going to take Rob Font. The line came down a little bit. I got plus 110. probably get plus 05 even money at this point.
Great stuff as always. You got to follow Matt at Matthew Holt VP if you're into the UFC, especially because you'll be texting out or tweeting out, I should say, what's going on with some of these fighters as we get closer to the fight card itself. I'm always watching every single fight card to what you have to say. And also during the fights, I like the updates you throw out there during the fights and who you might be on, maybe adding to your card throughout the fight card. And it's always a good follow at Matthew Holt VP.
It is time for our Mastriani's Play of the Day.
It's the Play of the Day, brought to you by Mastriani's.
All I do is... Of course, we'll let you know that Mastriani's, one of the great spots in town, in Summerlin, at the corner of Wallapai and Desert Inn, 3330 South Wallapai. This is an extraordinary menu, eclectic, something for everybody's taste. The Italian cuisine is absolutely marvelous. Make sure and put it on your bucket list if you haven't been to Mastriani's yet. 702-367-7511 is the number to make a reservation. If you've been, you already know how great it is. But always make that reservation if you're going in the evening. You're not going to be here tomorrow, Scott, right. So we're going to do a little NFL for our Mastriani's Play of the Day, and we'll look at the matchup between the Jaguars and the Patriots. Look, the weather is going to be, from what we can gather, okay in New England this weekend. I don't think Brady's hand injury is going to be anything significant because the MRI came back negative. Nothing's broken. Probably just some swelling, and they'll fix that between now and game day. But if you're looking at last week's game between the Jaguars and I almost said Pirates, Jaguars and Steelers as an indicator for this week, I wouldn't. I think that was kind of a fluke game as far as Jacksonville's concerned, and I think you get a game plan that Jacksonville's going to try and stay in this by keeping it conservative and relying on their defense, and I think their defense is good enough to limit the Patriots. I'm looking at the under in this game.
I like your analysis on that. I think it's going to be a close, hard-fought game. Real quickly, I talked about it a couple of times this week. The way they game plan Jacksonville for covering receivers on the defensive, out of the defensive secondary is something that tends to give New England's receivers trouble. They have a history of it. We saw it earlier this season against Miami, and the Jaguars are better at it than Miami was, as we all know.
Yes.
And if they're able to bump the Patriot receivers at the line of scrimmage, it might cause some of their timing to drop a little bit, and then you have a lower scoring game. I like your analysis.
All right. Well, we'll see how it works out under on the Jaguars and Patriots. Meanwhile, thanks to Matthew Holt, especially thanks to Matt for taking time out of a meeting at CG Technology to join us for today's spot.
And I bid you good night, good night, good night. I'll catch you on the flip side.